Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About Houses. I'm Todd.
I'm Juana.
Okay, we are going to talk about what a starter home is and how much money it takes a first-time buyer based on what market you're in. We have incredible data, and we have very cool charts and a very cool table and a bunch of interesting data. You're going to learn all about this. So this is a video you want to bookmark so you can watch it numerous times.
Right. And this video is dedicated to Jean.
Jean! I didn't get to meet Jean.
Yes, I got to meet Jean.
Do you want to tell the story?
Oh, so I was meeting with a contractor, and Jean is a designer for this contractor. His name is John Newton here in Las Vegas. And I got to meet Jean, his designer, and she watches our videos. So we appreciate you, Jean. And this video actually speaks to what we talked about, which is being a first-time buyer.
Okay, so this is an article. It's actually a massive blog post from Redfin. Redfin probably has the best blog. If you're into reading blogs, not watching YouTube, Redfin blog is probably one of the best ones. Okay, first-time buyers need to earn 13% more than a year ago to afford the typical U.S. starter home. Now, when you first see this, because we're going to go show all the numbers, people are then like, oh, hey, then I'm going to wait to buy, right? But we're going to show on some of these charts why that's probably a huge mistake, right?
Right. So there's a lot going on, so let's stay tuned and let's get through it.
Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the data here. Okay, first of all, rising home prices and elevated mortgage rates have pushed the income necessary to buy the typical U.S. starter home up over 13% last year. The chart we're going to show has all the cities and what the income you have to buy a starter home. We're also going to define what a starter home is. They have like an actual definition. New listings of starter homes are down 23%, the biggest decline since the start of the pandemic. Normally, there's just like a normal steady stream of these things, right? How do the starter homes end up getting on the market?
So a lot of times the starter homes are new construction.
Okay.
So that is actually quite a big chunk of the starter homes. And then, of course, they tend to be this definition of a starter home, which is between the 5% and the 30%, right? 35%. So that's the bottom, not quite the very bottom of the market, but just above that.
It's like the bottom third.
Right, so the bottom third of the market. So these homes tend to be maybe around 1,400 square feet. They tend to be pretty basic, not a lot of bells and whistles, but they're a great place to get started.
Doorbell.
Doorbell?
It has a doorbell, but no.
Yes.
Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you have to knock. Okay. San Francisco, Austin, and Phoenix are the only major U.S. metros where the income needed to buy a starter home has dropped over the last year. It's risen over 20% in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Miami, more than anywhere else in the country. But remember that we just did the update with Zillow, and San Francisco, Austin, Phoenix are all going to get more expensive and then estimated to get more expensive over the next year. Okay, if you're in those markets, you buy your starter home as soon as possible, especially San Francisco. Okay, the share of starter homes going to all cash buyers is decades high. I've got a chart showing this.
Right, so there's a good reason for that, right? We've got inflation going on, so people are looking for somewhere to park money. And then, of course, we've got the fact that that price point is a price point that is more affordable for investors than obviously more expensive homes, and their return on investment is better. So this is the really big point to make is, let's say you spend $300,000 on a house, and let's say that the rent that you get for it is $2,000 a month. That's a good return on investment. But let's say you spend $400,000 on a house, and maybe what you get for that $400,000 is maybe, let's say, $2,400 a month. Well, that's not as good as $300,000 and getting $2,000 a month. So the higher you go in price, usually there's a lesser return on investment. So that's why these entry-level homes are favored by investors, is because that's usually the best return on investment.
Yeah. So here's the magic number. A first-time home buyer must earn $64,500 per year to afford the typical U.S. starter home, up 13% from a year ago, which is the 13% is $7,200. So it was only like $5,500 or so, 5,700 basically. Okay, that's due to the 1-2 punch of higher mortgage rates and higher home prices. It's a combination of those two things. Now remember, that's total. So if it's two people, then that's your combined income. That's not unreasonable. It's like two people that both work fine. Okay, Here's the Redfin chart. Now, this chart goes all the way back to March of 2012. What this is this is the national price of starter homes, median starter homes, okay? Now, this chart does not go down anywhere. It basically goes up. As you can see, it goes up and to the right. And then it also just has these little normal, like sine wave, spring, fall. Right? But you can see that it doesn't look like, oh my gosh, they're just going to come collapsing down.
Right. So what you see is the seasonality of it, but you can see that the trend is for increasing values.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty eye-opening. Back in June of 2019, it was 166. It's 243 now. There's a bunch of people who probably could have bought a starter home at any point in the past, but we're probably waiting for the housing market to crash. The other thing that's interesting about this is very stable. This is probably one of the most stable appreciation charts I've seen, that bottom 5 to 35%. I don't know why they don't count the bottom 5%. Maybe those are just really bad houses that like nobody would actually buy as a starter home. Maybe they're not livable, or they just statistically there's too much their goofiness happening there, so they just went 5 to 35.
Right. So I think you've got a point. I think that bottom 5% tends to include homes that maybe are tear downs and that sort of thing, and that would skew the numbers too much.
Okay. All right. Okay. Many prospective first-time home buyers are between a rock and a hard place because rents remain elevated too. The typical U.S. asking rent is just $24 shy of the 2053 peak hit in 2022. So rents aren't, it's not like, people are saying, oh, I don't want to pay $2,400 for a house when I can only rent for $2,000. But the problem is in 5 years, you'll still be paying $2,400 and rents could be above that.
Right.
And then you lose all the other, what are some of the other advantages of buying that you would lose if you rent?
Right. So you would lose building equity.
Oh, every time you make your payment, some of that goes to pay down your principal.
Right.
You're paying it to yourself.
You would lose appreciation.
Oh yeah, sure. The house you buy it for $300, you can sell for $400, and even though you're paying $400 more a month, you put $100,000 in your pocket when you sell it.
Right. Depending on what's going on in your life, there may be tax deductions for interest, for mortgage interest, for property taxes, that sort of thing.
Okay, you get a ton of tax deductions potentially.
And then there's the stability, right? Because you are going to have a fixed rate for your living expenses going forward. The only increases, you're going to have nominal increases in property taxes and insurance, but those are pretty nominal. And then over time, that mortgage payment becomes less and less of a burden as your income increases, which most people's income does increase over time. And
remember, all the profit you put in your pocket is not taxable.
Right.
You can keep it up to a certain amount.
Right. So right now it's the first $250,000 for an individual, $500,000 for a couple. But yes, so that's a lot of money. So particularly when we're talking about a starter home, I mean, the idea that it's going to appreciate $500,000, that's wonderful. But
that's going to take more than 6 months.
It's going to take
like a year to make that much money.
It'll be a few years. So that's not something to be concerned about. So we are, in case you can't tell, we are proponents of home ownership. There are a lot of good reasons to be a homeowner, and that chart kind of shows you that particularly for starter homes, that tends to be a good investment over the long run. The values tend to increase, and it tends to be a stable increase in price over time.
Okay, all cash buyer purchase nearly 40% of starter homes in the U.S. Okay, now this doesn't mean it could be an investor buying it. We're just saying houses that are in that range that are starter homes. It doesn't mean it's the first time someone bought a house. They're not just paying cash.
Right.
So if an investor goes out and buys a rental house that's 30% from the bottom of the market and pays cash, that they bought a starter home with cash.
Right. So I mean, and I think that probably I would wager that a majority of those are investor purchases.
Yes, for sure. Starter homes are the perfect house. Investors don't want to be in the middle of the market or above the top of the market. They want to be below the median, about 15% generally.
Right, and they want to be at a place where they've got the greatest pool of possible tenants.
Right. So like a 3 or 4 bedroom, like in Vegas, it would be a 3 or 4 bedroom you can get for like 300 to 325. It's still below the median, but it's not super low. It'd still be in a decent area. You would probably still get $2,000 a month out of it,
Right.
something like that. That's kind of the sweet spot. Okay, this chart shows the cash purchases of starter homes. As you can see, you have to go all the way back. Even if you go back to May of 2014, which was 9 years ago, it's 36.7, 36.6. Now it's basically the same. There was nobody. This chart's misleading because the bottom's not zero, it's 27%, and then the top, it just stops at 50%. If you zoom out, this looks a little more normal, but if you go back to 2020, 2021, there weren't a lot of people paying cash because loans were super cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So more people were getting loans, and the reason why more people are paying cash is because money's expensive, so it's harder to buy.
Right.
Right.
So, and like I said before, it's a place for people to park money. If you have $300,000-$400,000 and you're looking for some place to park the money that's relatively low risk and is going to generate monthly income, this is a good option.
Also, that peak that's above 45% was probably like 2012, where their homes were still really cheap, and you could just go out and buy a bunch of them. In Vegas, you could buy easily for under $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And those like $80,000, $90,000, those homes are worth $300,000 today.
Right.
You could just go out and they were all over the place. They were easy to buy.
Right.
Okay, now this chart shows you, this is it's like a table. It shows you what you have to make and how much your payment is in all these cities on the West Coast. And the reason I like this is because Vegas is on here. But you could just check this out. We'll go through a couple of these. Median sale price in San Fran's 910. That's definitely less than it was 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was 1.3 million. It's substantially less.
Right.
Okay. But you need to make $6,000 a month to afford that. All of these include 20% down. Just so you know, that's where these numbers are coming from. This is not the 100% VA or 3.5% done FHA.
No. Only
3 cities are less than, you need less money than the previous year. San Fran, Austin, and Phoenix. Vegas, you need more money, 3.1%. But look, Wanda, this is not unrealistic, okay? Okay, median sale price $290.
Mm-hmm.
That's completely reasonable, right? It's $1,900 a month. Guys, rents in Vegas are $2,200.
Right.
It's $300 less than median rent, and you're building equity, and you get all these advantages. So when people are like, "Oh, you should do this versus doing that," it's not more. No, you could buy a house. It's probably the $2,200 rental might be a little nicer, but why wouldn't you buy a house that you can keep forever and build equity with, right?
That makes more sense.
And yes, you would have to be able to put 20% down on 290 is like 58,000. So, but you have to have 58,000. Also, that income is not unrealistic for 2 people to work, right? Or military. If you're here on active duty, you probably make, unless you're like an E1, you probably make 76. We actually had a bunch of military people come in, and like even E5s and E6, I was surprised how much money they make. They definitely could buy, like an E5 could definitely buy a house with their spouse not working.
Right.
They also get this housing allowance that was like $2,700 a month. It was pretty high here.
Yeah.
It's just an extra money for housing, so they could use that to make your payment. That's a huge advantage that military people have. San Diego is also on this chart. 610 is the median price. 4,000 is the median payment. You need to make 161 though to buy a $610,000 house.
Right, but their housing allowance is like $3,000.
That's just for an O1. That's for like an ensign.
Okay.
So depending on, I think an ensign would be the same as like an E6 or E7.
Okay.
So the more senior you get as an officer, and there's the reason we say San Diego is a big Navy town. There's a ton. There's like 12 naval bases there, and it's obviously more expensive because home prices have gone up, just like Anaheim, Portland, Los Angeles, all those other cities on there. Everything on here is west. This is all just showing West Coast. If you go look at Florida and places, it's way more.
Right.
The percent changes more.
Right. The percent changes more, but their values are actually lower than California.
Yeah, sure. So that's a trade-off. In Austin's not bad. Like 92,000 in Austin's probably pretty close to median income there. Like it's probably not unrealistic.
Right. I mean, well, it depends on what you do for a living, right? So
Right.
there's that.
Okay, so last thing I'm going to ask Juana. Someone gets a starter home.
Yes.
They say, I'm going to buy a starter home.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 5 years, I'm going to buy another home.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of people do you think sell the starter home and move the equity? And then what percent of people do you think keep the starter home and then use it as a rental?
So
and what would you do?
Okay, well, if you've watched any of our videos, you know exactly what I would do.
You would keep it and buy the one next door.
That's right. That's what I would do.
You would have bought the one next door while you were living there.
That's right.
And rented it out.
That's right. No, I'm a huge fan of real estate. I think it's a great investment. I think it's a relatively safe investment. I am risk averse, as Todd points out.
Super risk averse.
Okay, so I happen to think that real estate is a great place to put money because regardless of what the market does, that income keeps on coming because everybody has to live somewhere. As far as answering your question, as far as what percentage, I think obviously everybody's situation is different. I think if people are moving locally, I think they're more likely to hang on to that property and become landlords and go purchase something else. I think that's much more likely. I think if people are leaving the area, they're more likely to sell the property. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the way I'm going to answer that question. As far as percentages, I don't want to go down that path because people move for different reasons.
Right.
So that's my answer.
Okay. I think historically, most people sold the starter home.
I think the historically
2004, 3, 4, 5, because the starter home had a 8% interest rate. Right. And then they're now getting a 6.5% interest rate, and they don't want to keep that high interest loan. So they would just move the equity to the next place.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of an old model. I think the new model is to try to, because it was so hard to buy that first house.
Right.
I think it was so hard to buy that first house that I think people are going to hang on to it and they're going to just kind of keep purchasing and keep hanging on to houses. I don't think that they're going to hang on to every house that they own, but I think they're going to pick and choose depending on what makes sense for them. But I think a lot of people, particularly with a starter home, I think they're going to hang on to it because it's, like I said, it's a good investment. It cash flows better than any other move-up home that they're going to have.
Right. Tell us your story of your starter home. Mm-hmm. Did you keep it as a rental or did you sell it and use the money for the next house or whatever? Right.
So we want to hear from you. Tell us your story in the comments. Please remember to like the video, share the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get the next great video.
Yeah.
And Jean, it was very nice to have met you. And we'll see you all in the next video. Bye.
Bye.